Well, welcome back to the Build Different podcast, fellas. Good to see you again, Brian. A little change of background there. I see you went to IKEA. Did you take one off of Ted's book to lighten up your
No,
backdrop there?
this is actually a shelf I've been traveling with, and finally got around to setting up the background. It was one of those things that you kind of keep putting off because it's effort, but it's getting there. It'll give me
You
a little more
travel
time.
around with it? Is that what you said?
No, well, I mean, I moved to another place, so
So
I
cryptic.
just didn't. It took me a while to set up the background because we haven't had to do any like videos other than the
I
podcast. So
see. International man of mystery there. And Jarvis, it looks like are you hunkered in the basement this week or?
No, I'm on spring break with my kids, and no
Mm,
one ever told me, like, spring break for kids is just another terrible week for adults because your kids are all home, they're all loud, and so I'm just shelled up in the corner of the house just trying to keep it quiet.
yeah, spring break late this week, man. I don't envy that. I also remember spring break is much different when you're a parent, but this isn't a parenting podcast. But fellas, we're gonna have a fun time today. Brian, I like the background. You're looking good. Maybe need some lights back there, but we'll elevate you here. Fellas, another great setup here. Another featured guest. We've been rolling it in the featured guest realm. I'm honestly a big fan. One, because I've known this guest for many years, and it's been a long time since we've got to connect. Jarvis, you've gotten to connect with Joe, and who we'll bring on here. And this is going to be awesome. One, because Joe just brings a wealth of, I would say, just knowledge, wisdom, innovativeness, pioneeringness. I was trying to think of all the adjectives to describe Joe, but this is going to be really fun. And we're going to dive into just a little bit of his background that I think would be very interesting for many of y'all that are tuning in. So I'm teasing up here, but fellas, I'm digging these player cards. I don't know if they're here to stay, but they're fun to make. March Madness really nailed us here. But Joe, like I said, just kind of introed him a little bit. This is going to be great. Jarvis, I know you handpicked Joe from the archive. So what do you want to say before we bring him on here?
Joe's just one of my favorite minds in the construction industry. I mean, he's always, it feels like, 20 steps ahead, whether that's a good thing or the, right idea, wrong time. He's just ahead of it, it feels like. But he's just one of my favorite people to talk to, one of my favorite people to just riff with about where the industry is, where we can go, where technology sits today, how, it's creating problems but solving problems. And yeah, he's just an awesome guy. Good old Bubba Joe.
Yeah, this is going to be a good time. I feel like there's some people in this space. The world is so small that like you can use their first name only, and this is one of them that very much fits the bill. So, Joe, without further ado, let's bring you in here. Great to see you, friend.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, guys. You humbled me with that intro. It's crazy to think it's been 20 years, but man, it's been a fun ride.
I feel like 20 years in this space, though. We talk about tech years and cat years a little bit. 20 years is definitely feels like maybe 40 in the space, but not to age any of us all here. But this
No,
is going
it,
to be
it totally does. Yeah, for sure. I know. I came into this industry as a 20 something, thinking I would train a few people how to use BIM and I'd be out of a job. And 20 years later, it's totally defined my career. So
Yeah, it's crazy that we'll get into this too. It's funny. I was looking through kind of just building out your player card there, and I was like, man, I really do think, and I don't use this word often, of just pioneer, like someone who's genuinely like seeing what the future should look like, wants to be a part of building it, wants to be a part of like creating it. And man, Joe, I not to make you blush more, but man, it really is someone that like that word is very synonymous with you. And man, we are super fortunate to be able to chat with you more. I know the folks that are tuning in will just glean a lot from your wisdom and just your kind of forward and future thinking mind, which we're going to hopefully unpack and extract here in the next 40 minutes or so. But Brian, I know this is your first time meeting Joe, so new background. And I know you're showing up for him here. I still think Joe maybe has you one up there with the books and stuff back there, but what good to have you two finally meet, because anytime you get to bring your friends together, it's always good.
yeah, nice to meet you,
absolutely.
Brian.
Yeah, nice to meet you. It's actually funny how even how small the community is. Sometimes when you finally do meet somebody, they're like, "Oh, you know, literally everybody else that we know," right? So I think it's great.
The spider web is strong, we say around here. So, so much so that Brian hops in and out here, which we'll bring him back. But Joe, we're gonna have a good time. Really, what we're gonna do is break down these kind of four topics. Obviously, we kind of introduced you here a little bit, but I want to talk about really your early days of, again, what kind of made me feel like this word pioneer is synonymous with you and just this idea of Project Atlas, what it was. I'm sure many of the folks, if you are older than 10 years in kind of your seasoned career, may have heard about a tool like this back in the day. But we're going to talk about that. Obviously, that got acquired, so there'll be some kind of fun stories within that. And then, man, fast forward, I feel like Joe, 10 years ago looked much different from 10 years of now. And so we'll talk about just a little bit of the kind of future predictions that you've seen kind of along the way as a part of this. And yeah, we're gonna dive right into it. So I'm very curious. You mentioned, we'll get into this kind of first topic here, but like what first got you interested in this stuff of maybe the tech side of it? Was it something that you originally thought you were going to kind of be interested in? I feel like everyone's story of kind of where and how their career started is always super interesting. So yeah, I'll maybe just start there as a part of kind of let's kick this thing off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll take you back, but I'll try not to go too long. But I've always been interested in technology. I'm one of those lucky kids who had a computer in his bedroom since I was, at the age of 5. My dad would get new ones. He was always interested in technology. Had a computer in his office in our house growing up that I would play with, and he finally got sick of that, and would hand me down his old ones, and I would play games and pretend to code and do these different things. Um, and it was really just, for me, it was fun. I remember, rushing to finish my schoolwork in class so that I could jump on the Apple IIe and play, Oregon Trail, while the rest of the class was still working on an assignment. Um, and I don't think I thought computers were part of my future. I didn't think I could have a career, it was kind of based on technology. But when I got into college, I was good with math. I kind of was always interested in the built world, so I into civil engineering, which I liked, but I was always kind of felt like I was missing something. And I remember being in class one day, we were, studying like beam design, using some new software, and it was really basic. It was just like these little sticks with these little dots, and like the stick would bend, and you'd see the moment curve. And I remember asking the professor, like, "Hey, can we see what that beam like really looks like?" And he said, "Yeah, there's a tool for that." And he turns on the view where you can actually see the full profile of the I beam, and it's bending. And I'm like, "Yeah, like that's exactly what I want." And he quickly turns it off, and he's like, "I don't know why you'd ever need that. This diagram shows you exactly what you need to know." And that's when I knew, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong place. Like, to me, that visualization of what was happening and how those elements interacted, like that was the secret sauce. I was always just, in awe of construction sites and the pieces and how things went together. So to me, visualizing that and seeing it, that was the key. It wasn't the calculations and the math that I was interested in. It was the creation of those tools, things.
It's cool to see, like, I love a good LinkedIn profile, one, because it's just cool to see progressions of careers. But like, yeah, it's funny to see kind of the inflection point of like, oh yeah, you're very much on the civil side, diving into some of that stuff. And then it's like, whoa, okay, here we go. Now we're going to the GC side of it, very much involved in the VDC realm. I mean, not to date you,
Yeah.
Joe, but we got to do this at some point. I mean, 2009 and 2013, that is like prime time construction, just really starting to hit kind of the sales, I guess, or technology really starting to hit the sales. But yeah,
Yeah.
just curious to hear the transition like in that time of things were just exploding. And I feel like that was such an interesting time to make a move. And yeah, dive into that a little
It,
bit of just what that was like.
it, It totally was. Grant, you're totally right. Before '09, BIM was really a design tool. And there weren't a lot of people talking about it on the contractor side of things. And I remember E&R, back when there were magazines with covers. On the cover of their magazine, it said 2009, the year of BIM for the contractor.
Mm.
And I was still working in a design firm at that time, but a friend of mine was doing consulting for a GC in Dallas, Rogers O'Brien, and he told me that they were considering kind of going all in on this, and they wanted to start a department to do BIM, these digital tools. And at the time, and if you guys remember, '09 was right in the throes of the recession, from kind of the housing crisis, and I remember my family was saying, like, "You're gonna go work for a builder, a contractor? Like, they're firing people right now." And they were letting go of staff. But Rogers O'Brien was always really strategic company, and they saw the writing on the wall. They knew this was something that was important. And they chose to invest kind of at that period when everybody else was pulling away.
It's funny that I feel like often we don't go back and talk about history. I mean, that's only what 16 years ago, right? Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy to me to
No.
think. But yeah, you think
Yeah.
about '08 and '09 as things start to turn, and it's like that's when investments really changed and people started. And that's obviously where you and Jarvis got to meet was kind of those early days at RO. And so, Jarvis, I'll hand the mic to you because I could go in a million different directions here. But yeah, just seeing kind of okay, so you started VDC stuff around that kind of transition moment up to director of tech innovation. Like, so Jarvis, I want to cue you into the story because that's where obviously you and Joe kind of started to get to know each other.
Yeah, 2014 is the dawn of the Joe and Jarvis friendship here. So a few years after he'd already started, he'd kind of established himself at Rogers O'Brien. But what was interesting to me when I first met you, Joe, was you'd kind of conquered, I'm gonna say, probably the right word. You and Todd Wynn had kind of conquered the paper to digital piece. And then it was interesting because when I first met you guys, you said, "Now what's the next thing?" Like you guys always have your heads on to say what's coming down the pipe. We don't want to miss it. We want to be a part of it. I guess where during that 2009 to 2014, 15 time did you see, yeah, going from digital or paper to digital was a great move. I mean, contractors with digital plans that won our March Madness bracket, tablets with digital plans and stuff. But then what triggered you to say there's got to be down the road to the next phase?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And just to back up a tiny bit, like, around that '09 period, when I started RO, they had three, fax machines that used to get bids from, subs that would roll over as each fax got busy. I mean, that's, where we were. And I was trying to push this, 3D coordination and schedule, and it was a bit too much too fast. And Todd, as you mentioned, Jarvis, Todd Wynn, was working for another company at the time, and I saw what he was doing with digital documents. And this was on PC computers. This was before the iPad. It's actually, I don't know if you guys know, today's the 15th anniversary of the unveiling of the iPad. And as you
Huh.
said, Jarvis, that's what really catapulted that mobile multi-gesture, cloud connected device is really what allowed, digital docs to take off. And that was the foundation we were missing. We were pushing them and some of these other technologies ahead of that. And I realized, like, we got to lay the foundation layer. We got to get our folder structure right. We got to get, the right documents in people's hands. But like he said, once we got that foundation, it opened all the doors. Once we had a place to organize and store that data, to access it, then we started thinking about data capture in the field. How are we collecting, information? How can we do that better? And we started looking at the hardware, scene. I remember being in the conference room at RO, flying these like little, sharper image style drones that were totally garbage. And the chairman of the board came into the conference room and saw us playing with these toys, and he was like, "What are you guys doing?" And we explained to him, like, I know this doesn't look like it, but this is the future. We can inspect the sides of buildings with these things, and we've got an eye in the sky, the superintendent above the job site. And those are the kind of things that we were looking for people like Jarvis, to come in and do. And for us, building that team of passionate people that were excited about that technology was so important. We were going to colleges and recruiting, and that's where we met. And we were always looking for people that were interested in pushing that envelope and trying something different, and about making construction interesting and fun again.
Do you think that, man, I love a good trip down memory lane. I don't know. Everyone may have their own kind of opinions, but
Was
I
it
always
was
think
it the
it's,
sharper image that got you?
I mean, that, yes. And it's crazy. Yeah.
It
15
was the
years
fax
ago.
machine, Grant's like, I remember that.
Guys, really, really, nestling me to sleep there. I think that what's fascinating is your guys is big. So yeah, I remember I was at a different contractor, was always kind of, encouraged in looking at what you and Todd and Jarvis at the time were like really doing. And it just felt like you guys had the playbook for the future in your office, and you were like either writing it and or like executing it. And it was just fascinating to me because again, like I came out of school in, 13, 14, started to see kind of who was going around in the Dallas area. And it was just fascinating to me that you guys just always felt like you were 2 or 3 steps ahead, always understanding like there's got to be more. In one of your first big pushes, obviously the iPad came out, and it's like, all right, PDFs aren't going to be the future, but they are a huge step in that direction to help digitize this really challenged industry by technology. And so I want to camp here a little bit of just like, okay, so you're there at RO, you're really kind of, again, 2 or 3 steps ahead. What was this big push for, and what was, Project Atlas for those that maybe are younger who are listeners here that don't know what that is? Because there wasn't a tool at the time that I felt was more in the future than what you guys were really trying to push for. And I'll pull up some stuff to kind of show people in the background of what this will look like. But what is Project Atlas? Where did that come from? How did kind of that, bud from a seed that you guys were really kind of starting within the RO team?
Yeah, it came out of a lot of our experiences in implementing, technology. We had been doing that for several years, and yeah, we've talked a little bit about, digitizing processes, and a lot of what we were doing was taking paper processes and just digitizing the data and digitalizing the workflow. And at times it felt like we were kind of trying to shove square peg in a round hole. And we knew that there were future workflows that weren't, you know, uh, restricted by kind of our current, ways of thinking. And it took a conference and a topic. Rick Kahn and some others at the BIM forum put together this session actually in Dallas uh, to talk about the future of construction, what that would look like. And they had several presentations. Um, and me and Todd and another friend of ours from another contractor, Ben, we were selected to be part of that. And we went to lunch one day and just decided like we're gonna come up with something different. We're gonna really think about the future of what could be. And at the time, Ben was working at DFW Airport, huge terminal expansion, really big, site, obviously. And he had stitched together this really complex floor plan of the entire site. And I remember him telling us like he would get there in the morning, he would open up that file, and then he would go get some coffee and do a job walk because it took an hour for that file to load and to fully, render out. And then he would use that throughout the day to reference, different things that were going on the site. So we really took that as a as a as a challenge and as a vision for the future of like what if we applied the principles of Google Maps to the construction industry? What if we removed those paper boundaries and we said, there is no limit. The project can be as big as the earth, because that's where we build. Everything from bridges and highways to data centers and airports and all these things. And so our whole belief was that by one bringing the design back together, it's we do all this amazing stuff putting together this 3D model and BIM, and then we're going to give it over to the contractor and we put it through the deli slicer and we slice it into all these pieces and parts, and we expect the contractor to kind of assemble it all back together and understand how all that went together. And we believe that if we kept all that together, we kept it in context, and then we provided you with information about the real world, that the insights would just kind of appear. And that's exactly what happened is guys would be doing inspections out on a roadway. And the photos from last week, the inspection report, it was right there at their feet, essentially, where they were located on the site. That data just kind of naturally bubbled up to them. And that's what we were trying to solve is product engineers and other team members, they got more data than ever. And that's the downside to digitalization, right? Is the architects can press print and spit out endless designs. There's so much information to go through, and we were just hoping to kind of make that task a little easier.
We have a lot of folks that just listen, and I feel like I say this each episode of like you got to tune in and watch because some of the stuff we try to play in the background while you're explaining this is this video, 130 seconds of epic awesomeness. Just love titles back then. That's a good catchy title, but it's so crazy to look back and pull this video up because I had to scroll down here to see 7 years ago. Like, let's just let that kind of sit and bake in here. 7 years ago, which again, Google Maps wasn't, I would call it, as standard on people's phones. This is probably would have been the iPhone 6, 7 maybe at the time, and like what just some of the phrases that you were using of like, yeah, like we really wanted to mimic Google Maps. I just want to camp here for a second of like Google Maps was not even that popular back in the day, as if it is now, because obviously it's incredibly popular now. But the things that you guys were like ideating were like so far, and there's a 360 image that's popping up in here onto a floor plan that wasn't really prevalent back then. We're talking about overlays and sensors and some of this stuff. Were these ideas like stuff that you guys kind of cooked up in your boardroom, late nights thinking, or were there like people that really kind of elevated this stuff to become what you guys obviously mocked up here and eventually built it a product? But where did this stuff come from? Because again, I keep thinking of you guys as like literally in this room cooking up what the future truly is, and there's so many things on here that eventually came into fruition that you can't ignore. I think that part of it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, Grant. I think it comes down to people. Like that's the one, big aha for me in my 20-year career is that I thought I was going to be, building tools and implementing technology. And it was really about, building teams and empowering people. And really all this is a result of that. It's about, finding passionate people. It's about giving them a you know distant but clear goal, and not micromanaging their path to get there, and giving them the freedom to have those discoveries. One of the things that we tried to do at both Rogers O'Brien and at Project Atlas was Friday afternoons were for exploration. They were for research. And if you wanted to put down the project you're working on that week and build something new, try something different, watch a webinar or whatever it was, we wanted people to explore. And that's where a lot of those, ideas and, implementations came from.
Fellas, I'm stealing the mic. It's been too long since Joe and I've got to connect. So I knew I was going to be killing some airtime here.
I mean, one thing I definitely want to talk about is you see a lot of people online even today that says you have to get all this feedback from the field, but I think that sometimes it gets misconstrued of like you need everybody to tell you what to build, and in reality, as a great not just owner of a company but a product manager, I'm sure like the team was very lean when you first started out. You kind of have to be this quarterback where you're not throwing the ball where the wide receiver is, but where that wide receiver is going. So like how do you kind of delineate between like what people are asking you and filter out to get, what you kind of want, like create things that people aren't even asking for yet? Because you truly have done that. I've seen a lot of other companies that just kind of, GPT wrapped type of, products that are pretty similar, but this is definitely something that I haven't seen at that time.
Yeah, I think, man, that's a great question, Brian. And I think product managers have a harder job today than any other role, really. They're a lot like contractors in that they're trying to build something new. But I think the difference is that every week it's got to evolve, it's got to get better, it's got to change. And you've got those power users, those super users out there that want to see those new tools, those new functionality. They're pushing the envelope with it. And then you've got the vast majority of your users that are just trying to use it every day. And you're trying to make it, more usable, more efficient for them. And I think balancing those two needs as a product manager is incredibly, incredibly difficult. But I really believe that there's power in that product vision, like you were saying. I think I think it's really important for a product team to be very clear about, what future they want to head towards, and what that looks like, and give the different team members, permission to kind of get there in different ways. But to use, goals and objectives to really align everybody around, around that. Developing that vision is harder, but I think the guy that kind of I read a lot about when I was younger was Steve Krug. He's this usability guy who kind of focused on web design early on, and he talked a lot about usability testing. And I don't fancy myself a usability tester at all or anything like that, but it involves getting out and going to the job site, right? And looking over your user's shoulder, walking the job with them, understanding why that button click takes, as long as it does, why the workflow doesn't work in the order, you've made it in, and taking those ideas and those influences that you've had from other tools, from other technologies, and trying to kind of meld all that into a solution. In a lot of ways, that's the civil engineering mindset. It's the architecture mindset. It's the construction mindset of like, what do I have at my disposal, and how can I use that, to build a better process, to build a better widget.
I
Go ahead.
actually love that you even talked about civil engineering there too, because yeah, it's not, it just teaches you how to think. You're not necessarily walking out of there and like, okay, great, I memorized every single type of, I-beam dimension.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned something, Joe, that stands out of like product management now is very much more difficult than it was 15 years ago. Not only from call it just the speed or pace of innovation, but the amount of other call it tools and competitors in the space of like kind of always wanting to keep up, always wanting to be ahead, and you lose sight of I think what you just brought a lot of light to, just like, hey, what about the usability? What about some of these things that like when was the last time you gone out to a field and literally watched someone use your product? Was it a week ago? A month ago? Have you done it this year? And that I think speaks so much to uh, kind of the end and the field user. But the other part that I love you said of just like, hey, if the partners in software that you're going up against, if you don't match from a vision standpoint, it's probably not going to work out. And I think that's what's also tricky is that people are so attracted to the new, the now, the next, and they kind of don't really understand the spine of that, which is, I think, to your point, the vision, kind of the core pillars of what make their company. And it's not really sexy, right? Like it's not something that, it's a feature or a function that's in the software that you're like, oh, I want to go do that. But it's tricky that it is so important because you talk about these things not wanting to be 1 year and done, tools. Like you want to build a partnership with folks. And I don't know, that word and phrase is just, I would say, unfortunately diminished in the software space because of
Yeah.
a lot of reasons, I'm sure. But yeah, any thoughts to that?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you bring that up, Grant. I talked earlier about, people kind of being the big discovery in it. And for me, it's the change management of people. And I think, product managers are kind of at ground zero of change management within organizations. And I think that's what prepared me for that software startup side was, I'd spent 10 years in the industry trying to apply these tools, trying to implement them, trying to change hearts and minds, and understanding and applying that psychology. I think over many many years is what put me in the right mindset to kind of think about how to design a product, how to how to build it, how to roll it out. Um, because I think that transformational leadership that you have to implement these things is really, core of that. And it's true whether it's software or anything else, right? We were saying as a product manager, you've got to go out to the field and really understand, your customer in the field. But the same is true for a leader in any company. If the guy in the trenches doesn't really believe that his pain and what the challenges that he has to kind of put up with every day, you're not getting his trust, his respect, his passion.
I want to transition us here to so Atlas got acquired. So successful, so much attention, a lot of great kind of eyes and ears on it. Let's kind of move into like, all right, what did that look like? So you guys, we're building this product out. Jarvis moved over from RO to the Atlas team. You guys were bringing in customers, doing some things up. All right. Bluebeam comes knocking on the door. Not a small name in the tech space back in that time, which I think is very interesting. A lot of end users, I think, can easily equate certain stories with acquisitions, whether good or bad. But I want to hear it from from the founder's mouth. Like what was this like? Like what was it like to get, tapped on the shoulder? How did it kind of transition? And yeah, let's dive into that part.
Yeah, it was a crazy story and kind of crazy at how it all happened, but we did plan it to some degree. We always knew that an early exit was something that we were hoping for as a company. We knew that we weren't software developers, product managers. We had built this software from within the construction company and spun it out and gotten it funded, developed and had our first customers, as you said. But we knew it was a much bigger thing. I mean, we were trying to change the way that people access information, in the field, and it wasn't something that was going to be done at a small scale. And we knew we really had to partner with someone to get it to the industry, somebody big. And at the time, we were users of Bluebeam, big fans of what they had done with PDFs. Um, and we had talked to several partners, but felt like that was going to be a good place for us. Um, and hindsight is always 2020. Looking back, if I had it all to do over again, I think we would have waited on that, strategic acquisition a little bit longer, spent a little bit more time, validating product with our customers, gotten a little bit larger customer base. Because as with anything, when you get absorbed into another company, there's a lot of transition and growing pains there that you have to deal with that I don't think we were prepared for. We didn't have that experience. It was Bluebeam's first acquisition of another company, and obviously it was our first time getting acquired. Um, and I think looking back, I would have given myself a lot more credit. We at the time we were more interested in making sure that we checked all the boxes, that we were acquirable, that we had all of our ducks in a row from a, financial and legal standpoint. And I wish we would have been a little bit more focused on the post-acquisition partnership. And what does that look like? And how do we work together? And how are strategic decisions, made? We didn't feel like that was maybe our place to ask at the time. And we came from a company, Rogers O'Brien, that was heavily strategic, that had a very defined strategic roadmap and process for defining those things. And we came into basically a company that had evolved from being a startup into kind of a, large to medium sized company. And um, the processes were different. The way that they, made decisions strategically were different. And that was something we struggled with, to be honest. And it was challenging.
Did Bluebeam get acquired before the Atlas acquisition?
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Grant. The Bluebeam that we kind of knew from the industry, the startup Bluebeam had been acquired by Nemetschek a few years earlier, and had started to make some changes. There were executive changes, there were changes in what was important to the board of Bluebeam and how growth was defined within the company, and those sorts of things. And again, those are things that I think as a young entrepreneur, as someone who's not from the software industry, we felt like we weren't in the position to kind of dig into, and that's a lesson learned. I think we really would have attempted to understand those things a lot better had we had to do it over again.
Brian, I see some wheels turning up there.
No, no, I mean, I don't know how technical or like how in the weeds we can go into this acquisition. That's how I'm just trying to
Well, I think what's interesting, Joe, is like,
do you have a Cybertruck out front? Like how much can we get into this?
uh,
For us, we were a small company, and we made sure that we did right by our early investors. We had some great angels that came in and helped us early on, and we wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. And for us, getting acquired, getting to go work at Bluebeam, getting to kind of be on what we considered the precipice of software development in the industry, that was a big part of the appeal to us. And so no Cybertruck to answer your question.
Well, I mean,
Um,
well, the other thing there too. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I
Oh
was
no,
gonna say that's
I would.
funny because the other founder does have one. So yeah.
Yeah, we got to bring him back on here, and I've heard Todd talk about his Cybertruck, and it is, man, you want to go down a deep rabbit hole in good ways. But go for it, Jarvis.
Oh no, go you roll first, Brian, then I'll go.
No, I just kind of wanted to see like, okay, great. So this acquisition happened. You definitely got to see the other side of like, a startup company later stage, and now, what are you currently working on right now, and like, what are you taking from kind of those experiences? Is kind of what I'm curious about. Like, what are you not gonna ever make a mistake of again?
What a
ooh, that's
question.
a tough
What a,
one.
yeah, what a softball there.
Oh man, I won't say never to anything, Brian. I'm dumb enough to repeat plenty of my mistakes. But I do think, to answer your question, some of the things I've been working on lately, I've got a startup I'm working on. It's very early stages, map based, if you could guess it, but a slightly different twist on that. Um, but I'm taking it slow. There's no investment right now. It's wholly owned by the founders. We get to kind of define where things are going and at what pace. Um, but I also know that's something that's going to take time to develop, and it may not turn into what I hope it turns into. And so I'm working with other companies, looking for other opportunities, kind of constantly. But I'd say the thing that I've learned from that is that every company, has its challenges, and it doesn't matter whether you're selling, something in retail or a service to an end user in the construction industry. We've all got challenges, and I really feel like everyone is struggling with this digital transformation that everyone is having to kind of fix their bicycle as they ride it, into the future. We're all having to kind of work on things as we try to move our organizations forward. And to me, the biggest takeaway, the thing that I hopefully won't make a mistake on again, Brian, is that I'm not going to work with anybody I don't want to work with ever again. I want to work with people that are passionate about what they're doing, that I share, common values with, common ways of working. Because man, life's just too short, and there's too many opportunities out there that need fixing, and that are valuable things to work on. To waste my time with a team that's not, motivated, that doesn't share the same values I do. Um, so that's kind of the big takeaway that I've had through all this is being, clearer about what I want, and making sure that that matches up with the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, my last comment here, guy. I don't want to hog the mic too much, but it's funny how at a certain point in time, which was not that long ago, before AI was really a word that people were using daily, a good indicator of a startup's growth was hiring. They would hire, 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 hire without like, I mean, obviously quality diminishes when you have to just get bodies on, on computers, but it seems like the direction you're going is definitely more geared towards the future of, as long like we can have a smaller, leaner team and we can just amplify those people, and you have less of this like middle management kind of deals. And I mean, right now is probably the best time to be building, actually having already had a prior exit.
No, I think you're right, Brian. I think there's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity about the future, but there's also, I feel excited about a lot of it too. And we're kind of sliding into the prediction topic a little bit, but I see this day in the future of hyper specialization where AI enables, individuals to really follow these deep, deep passions that they have inside. And, globalization allows them to find a customer anywhere in the world. And so I think we're going to see people that are, focused on, small niche things that they really care about. And they've got, AI to kind of help them, fill in the gaps, to help them, start that company, be their legal consultant, financial consultant, product management teacher, whatever it is. And I do agree that, smaller teams, I think, are going to have the ability to make a bigger impact. This is a prediction not for 2025, but I'm kind of looking forward to the day when a project team goes after a big project and they don't have a GC behind them, where a group of guys that have the experience to build a project come together and form almost like a temporary company to go after a project and say, we've got the resources and the capabilities to do this. We don't need all this, back end of a company to support us. We can do this with the tools we've got available.
Yeah,
Wow.
I love the transition
Yeah,
here
that's some
into
next level. No. Yeah.
See, this is what happens. Joe's got his own crystal ball that just happens to play out. We'll roll the tape here and call it 2 to 3 years. I do think it's interesting, Joe, and something that, call it the lost art, but even this last time catching up with Todd, like just how much the psychology, like the human just psychology study has been like a lost kind of dynamic or kind of element to this industry, both software, both construction. Like we talk about it all the time on here, of just kind of leadership skills, people skills that, ultimately get kind of, second, third place on the scoreboard, just because it's like, oh, you look up at the scoreboard and it's dollars and cents, revenue and growth and all those things. But it is fast. I don't know. I feel like we've had this term of like the mistake of of things. I did not see it as a mistake. I hope and be curious of too, of like, you don't see it as a mistake. It's just interesting. I think hindsight always helps us gain perspective. But yeah, like, how would you categorize the transition that, from RO to Atlas to acquisition to what you're doing? Like, how would you describe that journey in 2 to 3 words? Because I think that's what's interesting, if people are going to have thoughts, opinions to it. But from your sense of the source, like, what has that been like in a couple keywords or phrases?
Oh man, I mean, it's meteoric and like humbling, Grant. Like, yeah, I mean, there's been challenges. I wish I would have done things differently. There are huge mistakes I've made, that affected employees' lives and other things like that. And I absolutely wish I could go back and do those things differently. But to be honest, I wouldn't change anything about the trajectory of my career. And I've been so lucky. And you could definitely, look at my resume and say that, I was able to develop this, this progression in technology, but I really feel like I was riding this wave. I was surfing in a way. And a lot of it for me was just following things that I was interested in. And I didn't really know where that next thing was going to take us, all the time. And yeah, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that there wasn't as much intention behind some of those things as I would have now. Um, but you need that when you're young, I think, and I need more of it now that I'm older. That ability to kind of be a little naive, to take some risk, to do something different, to not listen to the naysayers who are saying, that's not possible, or you guys want to be able to achieve that, to be able to tune that out. I think takes practice.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
go for it.
sorry, Grant. One thing, I mean, working with you, Joe, and everything, one thing, like you said, you feel like you were just kind of riding the wave. Like, if there's two things I'd say Joe Williams is, he's an amplifier. Like, you find the passions in the people that work with you, and you just push them to just dive into that. I mean, you look at Todd Wynn, Blake Potts, me, Mark Daly, like James Wagner, like a lot of us, you just kind of nurtured that along. So, I mean, even if you weren't like the driver behind some of those specifics, like I'd say that that's kind of your legacy with it. In kind of the retrospect, I just want to ask, it's kind of predictions, but kind of looking back, like, right tool, wrong time, right tool, wrong execution. There's not really a mapping engine in construction. We're still in that, I call it the MapQuest version of, Atlas booklet docs, which was the role of PDF, or the role of documents, the big architectural sheets. We're still in that MapQuest version, which is 2D PDFs broken up on tablets. Is there still space for a mapping engine like Atlas to come in?
Yeah, but great question. I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart, Jarvis. I truly believe there is. I think there's value in the map based interface and in a dynamic, limitless canvas that can really, display all the information that is part of our built environment. I definitely think 3D and digital twins obviously have a huge role in that in the future, but and being a BIM guy, this is hard to say for me, but I think there's a lot of value in 2D. The joke that we always used to make and still can make to this day is that when you navigate in Google Maps, you don't have 3D turned on. A lot of times that would be too distracting, be too much data, and that 2D navigation is what you need in that moment to find the information that you're looking for. And the reason that I believe that so strongly, Jarvis, is because I think location is the ultimate aggregator. It's the key in these databases that we've needed for so long to align all these siloed information, buckets that don't have context relative to one another. I think when you add the element of location, it brings everything together. It unifies data in a way that's really hard for a lot of other systems to be able to do.
Yeah, locations ain't going anywhere. I mean, it's interesting, Joe. I'm sure you've probably seen of like, Procore going through an acquisition of like needing some location
Unearth.
based, information with Unearth. You start talking about, Autodesk, another big player that is really investing in the location based, side. It's just fascinating. Like we live in a built world, we build in a built world. We need to
Yeah.
understand where things are in that, and information organized and aggregated by that is key. And I love your phrase of MapQuest, Jarvis, because it really is true. It's like very early precipice of this combination of what is reality in the location world and what is design in the location world, and how those two are very different continents right now. There's not a whole lot of things that are connecting those, other than small workflows and elements that I'm sure people have latched onto, call them cruise boats that are crossing that chasm. But it's not really something that's like a true bridge or tunnel that's kind of making some of that work. So, Joe, this has been super fun. We could definitely outlast and outpace another episode of some of these things that, yeah, I just think it's really interesting to hear your background, and one, just to go and dive into more of, yeah, lessons learned maybe is always, I think, an interesting way to think of it. I think just encouraging the next generation, and the next set of builders that are growing up, like the tablet to them was normal, right? Or interacting on those things. It'll be fascinating to watch, I think, some of this next generation come in where that's just normal to them. Like those are the things that they got to understand and use in school and their internships, and that kind of, I think, mindset coming into our industry is going to be fascinating. And boy, is the industry ready. Like we are ripe to, kind of take off of that. But any last thoughts? It was just one, I just love this conversation. We could go many more minutes and hours past. But yeah, any thoughts that we didn't touch on that you want to close us with?
No, man, I think you're right, Grant. I think the future's bright. I think I'm looking forward to having more digital natives, flood our industry with those expectations of, it's this easy for me to order a sandwich that gets delivered to my job site, instantly. Why is it so hard to order my steel package? Like why, I want that confusion from this next generation, because that kind of question asking is what drives us towards, better process in the future. And, not to say that every, young person that's coming into our industry's got, all the answers, and they definitely got to take that mindset that you mentioned of being a constant learner and, questioning how we could have done something a little differently. But and I'm hopeful for the future. I'm excited.
Well, let's hope that we can attract them, and that the backfill of the need is definitely met. But Joe, I definitely sense another conversation episode calling it the Joe Crystal Ball, because we didn't even untap
Oh, that'd be awesome.
many
Use some prediction, guys.
many of those. Joe, this has been great. One, it's great to see you again. It's great to just connect and reminisce, call it that, or whatever you want to phrase it as. But it's great to have you. Really appreciate just your context, wisdom, encouragement to bring more folks into the opportunities and possibilities of this industry. And yeah, appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. It's been fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Look forward to bringing Joe back. I'm sure leave some questions, some notes, some comments wherever we're posting this out at. Connect with Joe on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll be encouraged by the stuff that he's doing. But Joe, great to see you again. We'll catch you guys on the next one.